Hi, and welcome to the Pol-Economic Podcast, where today we're here with Ghassan Gammoh. If you could give a brief introduction on yourself.
Sure, definitely. Thanks, Tamara. My name is Ghassan Gammoh. I'm a high school social studies teacher here at the American School of Dubai. And it's my third year here, and it's actually my 10th year of teaching overall, and I'm really excited to do this.
That's very impressive. So the first question that I have for you today is, in your freshman year at Harvard, you played a significant role in planning a panel on the role of women in the Arab Spring. So how do you think that discussion impacted the views of Harvard students on Middle Eastern politics and these gender issues?
That's great. Thank you. In general, I think Harvard students are very politically active and engaged, and I mean, we're seeing that now with everything that's going on with Palestine. However, this panel was very powerful and enlightening for all of us, because we had speakers like Tawakkul Karman, the first Arab woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize, who's from Yemen, and Egyptian-American journalist and social commentator Mona Tahawi. Hearing from these women really drove the point home that these revolutions would not have been complete without the impact of women.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, in Egypt, men and women stood side by side in Tahrir Square to demand their rights, and women like Mona kept a journalistic record of everything that was happening at that time, the demands of the Egyptian people. And she didn't do it just locally, but it was also international. So I think for us at Harvard, it was like, okay, it's not just our bubble, it's like, how do we expand? So she helped broadcast the revolution to the world. Meanwhile, Tawakkul Karman was also the mother of the Yemeni revolution, and hearing her speak really inspired Harvard students to remember the importance of honest and real journalism.
So do you think your actions sort of served as like a ripple effect for the rest of the Harvard community, and just like it was amplified?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was part of Harvard Arab Weekend, which is a conference that we hosted every single year, and it's still hosted every year till this day. Mm-hmm. So it was an honor to be part of that, and the fact that it still goes on till this day is like a really big deal. Mm-hmm. Creating a space for Arabs and non-Arabs in the community to come together and deal with issues relating to the Arab world.
Mm-hmm. And adding on to that, there was a biennial Harvard Arab alumni recruiting trip, and during this trip you offered admissions advice to high school students in both Egypt and Jordan. So among your experiences, what do you think the most common concern or question that these students had in regards to studying abroad, and how did you address these questions?
Yeah, so I feel like one concern was more practical and the other more like philosophical. The most common concern was about financial aid and how to secure it during the admissions process, because the students we were talking to came from middle class and also lower middle class backgrounds. So my colleague Iman and I made sure to go over the financial aid application, FAFSA, and the importance of like really working closely with your parents when you're filling out applications, because they have all the information. Another concern that came up, at least in Jordan, was how to represent our culture, especially given that many of the students were Palestinian. So we advised them to make sure that they were educated on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict so that they could represent, because they would often be the only Arab, as I was, the only Arab in the room at these universities a lot of the time. So we also emphasized the importance of oral histories, like who they are really mattered, and the fact that Americans are always very open and very curious to listen, and they're willing to learn and grow. And so if you don't raise up your voice and speak about your people's history, then it's going to be a missed opportunity. So those were the two things that came up.
So do you think that also coming from these diverse backgrounds, it offered both benefits to obviously the Arabs who were getting a more distinguished academic nurturing, and also for the Americans and other individuals who got to benefit from their inclusion in the community?
Absolutely. I mean, that's, I think, what makes Harvard such a unique campus and such a unique place, is that we're able to have these difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know how much that is still allowed given mm-hmm. the current environment and what's happening on campus, but for sure, dialogue always is going to lead to a richer community.
Mm-hmm. So as well as that, you stated that you had an admiration towards Elie Wiesel. I wanted to ask how you integrate the themes that he portrayed in Night, which is in relation to the Holocaust and like the Jewish experience. So how do you integrate specifically the themes of faith and resilience into your microeconomics lessons, and use these challenging ideas to help students understand economic crises and their impact on the economy?
So when it comes to Elie Wiesel, I actually met him personally, which
Wow.
is before he died, which was an amazing, because I was invited to this Nobel Prize winning conference, and I got to meet him and talk to him, and that was really impactful. But his writings certainly impacted my passion for social justice issues, which is one of my sort of core tenets in my life. And one example would be, for example, the Unit 5 and 6 inquiry-based projects that we do in AP Micro. So in this project, we begin with a class viewing of the documentary The True Cost, which delves deep into the toxic, harmful, and socially unjust fast fashion industry. A dark, dark, dark place. So in viewing and reflecting on this documentary, I hope that my students develop their empathy, right? Which is what Elie Wiesel's book is all about, is like, how can we empathize with that person? And understanding that putting profits over people ends up in extremely tragic consequences for the people experiencing it and also everyone else, the ripple effects. So I hope they're inspired to pursue, I hope you guys are inspired to pursue social justice issues like racism, unequal wages around the world, and income inequality.
And do you think, obviously, being a part of these microeconomics classes and being forced into these discussions also like helps better prepare us in the future when dealing with these, social justice oriented
Absolutely,
issues?
because the boardrooms you're going to be in, the people are not going to be concerned with this necessarily. And so to come in with the facts and with the evidence and with the passion for global citizenship and for global social justice, it's going to be a necessary voice, and it's going to be something that people are going to perk up and listen to, because it is sadly a different perspective that isn't always accounted for.
Yeah,
And there's no time left in our world, especially as you see the way the world is operating, where the income inequality and the income gap between the 1% and the rest of the world is just getting wider and wider, as Pope Francis talks about almost in every speech. This is the issue of our generation, is like this widening income gap, widening inequality. So how do we tackle that? And I think us becoming entrepreneurs, business people, whatever it is, we need to have that at the forefront of our minds.
Yeah, and do you think coming from this Palestinian-oriented background sort of made you more aware to these different, world level challenges?
Definitely. I think because it's ingrained in our blood, right? It's who we are, is that we have had to struggle to let our voice be heard and to exist. And so I think that that translates into the world of economics and business, because it's like, are you going to stand up for the voiceless? Are we going to stand up for those people that are experiencing the brunt of income inequality and the people who aren't being treated equitably and fairly?
It's really interesting. Additionally, you stated a lot about history and about the history of different regions, so you actually did teach both history and microeconomics. So I wanted to ask how you find these disciplines, intersecting, and what inspired your initial transition from this history-oriented field to now the microeconomics-oriented field?
Right. So the interesting thing about economics and history is that almost any major event in history is a direct result of some economic cause. So for example, let's take Russia and Ukraine. The principal reason for the invasion by Russia was to push back the potential NATO advance to the Russian border, which is itself a reaction to US fears of Europe's increasing reliance on Russian gas and oil. So Russia is trying to push back against US hegemony in Europe, but also around the world. And it goes back to that reliance on gas and oil. Beyond this, if economics is not a direct cause of a historical conflict, then it definitely shows up in the aftermath, right? So keeping with the Russia and Ukraine example, Russia's brutal invasion has driven millions into poverty and debilitated, not destroyed, but debilitated Ukraine's economy. So meanwhile, there's these sanctions on Russia and the Russian economy, and Russia's been isolated by the rest of the world. So none of this has ended the war, and it's just sown financial turmoil and personal hardship in the region, but also across the world. So I'm talking macroeconomics now. Everything that's happening in the Russia-Ukraine war has an impact on markets in Sri Lanka, markets in Central Africa, markets in the United States, because Ukraine is one of the leading grain exporters of the world, Russia gas. And so international cooperation is affected, and histories are written by these economic shocks. negative supply shocks and positive supply shocks and things of that nature.
Yeah, and do you think that if like global leaders were to employ this lens, which is like a synergy between the economic and historical perspective, that they could sort of tackle or maybe address, you know, most of the problems that are present in our world, like such as the Russia-Ukraine crisis that you were discussing?
Yeah. I think every time anyone comes to the table, the negotiation table, to discuss things, it is not enough to just have a political perspective. You have to have the political, the economic, the social, the cultural, the linguistic. You have to have all the perspectives researched and well thought out, and you also have to have representatives of as many slices of society that you can have when you try to come to a solution, or else it's not going to be a solution that uplifts the marginalized and uplifts everyone in the community.
And that ties back into the income inequality that you were stating about. You need people from each different sect. Wow. So additionally, your teaching experiences as well as, you know, your upbringing concentrated in the Middle East. So I wanted to ask, you know, you were growing up in Saudi Arabia, you taught at King's Academy in Jordan, and now you're teaching microeconomics at the American School of Dubai. So how have these varied Middle Eastern experiences influenced your approach towards education, curricular development, and also student engagement in these different settings?
So my upbringing in Saudi is what made me a global citizen. I was born in a small community in Aramco, and it was every nationality, every religious background. You know, I was exposed to diversity when I was born, like genuine diversity. I also saw how unjust workers were being treated by the company, which inspired my passion for social justice. Workers in the community around us that helped keep the community that way, and also, you know, migrant laborers that worked in different people's homes. Furthermore, having taught in the Arab world my entire life, I really emphasized the importance of discussing Arab issues in my curriculum. For example, at King's Academy, I created a course called Modern Jordanian History, Reading the Past, Writing the Future, which introduced the King's Academy student population to a course that analyzed Jordanian history critically. I noticed there was a lack of education about Jordanian history at a school in Jordan with a Jordanian identity. So I took the initiative and created the course. We researched, we analyzed, we went on field trips, we read Arabic and English texts and primary sources, and we came up with visions for the future growth and prosperity of Jordan as a kingdom. Finally, being here at ASD, the importance of global citizenship has reemerged, right? It's one of our learner attributes in my teaching and the work I do outside of class. For example, all of our inquiry-based projects revolve around different countries around the world. My work with Undivided and Global Issues Network enable us to do things like the Gaza donation drive, cultural celebrations on campus for Diwali, Lunar New Year, whatever it is, and Harmonies for Hope. And MUN, obviously, as you know, allows students to learn more and more about critical global issues. So I think it's just very intertwined with, especially that the Middle East and the Arab world are always, I feel like, the center of so much politics, economics, social, cultural movements. So I feel very lucky to be working in this region and to have a pulse on what's going on.
And you specifically were talking about in Saudi how you saw this like unfair treatment of these different migrant workers, and I wanted to ask, you were recently present in a conference that was discussing the same thing relating to blue collar workers, specifically, you know, construction workers that are subjected to this treatment. So what do you think the importance is of amplifying sort of information and just making sure that everyone is aware in regards to these injustices that just go overlooked in society and neglected?
I think it's so important because these are the people we're living with here in our community in Dubai. Just on Friday, I watched a documentary by one of our colleagues, one of my students, Jamal Bazari. He created a documentary on why workers come to the UAE, and it was called Here for Family. And you know what I was struck by the most was that these men make 1,200 dirhams a month. And of that 1,200, 1,000 they send back home to Pakistan or Bangladesh or India, and they live their life off 200 dirhams a month. And so that was an eye-opener for me, and it was like, it just helped me to sort of recalibrate my life and rethink about how I spend and how I consume and where I devote my money to. Another thing he said, which was really impactful and goes to your question, is he said, what do you want others to know? You know, Jamal asked the guys that he was friends with in the documentary, and he said, if you are rich, if you are poor, giving to those who are in need. You know, and I was just like, whether you have nothing or whether you have everything, the importance of that, right? And so like, that's been something that's been really important to me throughout my life. whether it's family or friends or people I don't know, the idea of being charitable, like giving to the people that do not have the basic necessity that they need to live a decent life.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, obviously...
Because there's nothing that separates us. They are me and I am them. We are them and they are us. You know what I mean? Like there's no... Why should it be... Why can't I live off 200 dirham? I should be able to live off 200 dirhams a month. You know what I mean? Like, so... I mean, it's extreme, but it's also like a lesson to us.
Mm-hmm. It just introduces us to sort of the disparities and makes us realize that, maybe in our society we're more desensitized to, charity drives, or we don't actually understand the value of our dollar and how far it goes. Mm-hmm. So, as well as that, obviously you've traveled predominantly for educational pursuing, and I wanted to ask that, looking back at this educational journey, what are the key lessons you've learned that currently guide your teaching? And as you look to the futures, what challenges do you think are going to rise in education, sort of also looking at a technological standpoint?
Right. Yeah, that's great. So the main lesson that guides my work today is the importance of developing strong student-teacher relationships. To me, it all goes back to relationship. So getting to know my students on a deeply personal level allows me to create a safe space in my classrooms, and I believe also creates deep motivation within my students to succeed and do well, right? Like, I really do believe that, like, you're not going to do well for someone you don't love or someone you don't really care about, you know what I mean? Another important lesson I've learned is the importance of keeping my passions alive and always innovating, which gives me fuel to be the best teacher I can be, right? If all of us, no matter what career we're doing, are not taking care of ourselves, what can we give? So for example, this year I'm acting again. I'm the lead of this play that's coming up in a month. I'm singing again, pursuing social justice issues through the clubs and organizations I sponsor, and engaging in different artistic and cultural activities off of campus. So that's what fuels me, right? But the main challenge I anticipate facing moving forward, and I'm already facing actually, is the impact of artificial intelligence on education. So what place does ChatGPT have in our classrooms? How can we continue to encourage our students to produce authentic and meaningful work? I've made some adjustments to the way I do things, thinking about these questions, as you've noticed, I think, in my class, but I have much more to learn, which is why I look forward to taking a course on this topic this summer.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that actually the impact of these different, artificial intelligence programs are actually reducing student motivation and in the end making us a less equipped society as a whole?
In one word, yes. I think that there is a laziness. There is, when someone else can do it for you. I think it's not just ChatGPT, it's not just artificial intelligence, it's also just the prevalence of TikTok, the prevalence of social media apps, the prevalence of the fast nature of Snapchat, of all these things. It's quick, it's this idea of quick, and I want it quick, and I want it fast. And so I think we lose the ever important value of patience, and like that things take time, and hard things don't come overnight. Like hard work doesn't get achieved overnight. And so it's concerning. It's concerning, and I think part of it comes back to parenting, mm-hmm. and how parents are regulating their children's access to phones, internet, media, and it also goes back to the way that we in classrooms do it, and who we surround ourselves with, and the values that we have. Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of these things can take us into territory of lack of integrity and disrespect, lack of responsibility, and it's like these are values that we're taught either by our faith, by our parents, and so when that comes face to face, you have to face yourself and ask, what am I doing? Am I putting in the right effort? Am I being a woman or a man of integrity here?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And finally, you mentioned, how you started expressing yourself through different acts and different pursuits such as your singing, and I wanted to ask, you've demonstrated a strong connection to your cultural identity as a proud Palestinian through your recent singing performance, which was amazing, can I add?
Yeah,
of course.
Thank you so much.
So looking forward, how do you plan to further express this aspect of your identity through music or through other forms, and how important do you think it is to be vocal about these different societal issues through different acts of expression as an educator but also as an artist?
Thank you for asking about this tomorrow. So I actually do have something in the works, and I'm glad that I can sort of talk about this here. I'm going to be offering a workshop actually open to the whole ASD community on Saturday, February 24th at the Include All conference happening on campus. It's called Palestinian Oral Histories, Walking in the Footsteps of the Past. At this workshop, I'm going to share the history of my grandmother Emily, who left Jaffa, Palestine during the 1948 Nakba and was never able to return to her beloved homeland, our homeland. I'll also offer a space for workshop participants to share their own oral histories related to the Nakba or any other global conflict. And by sharing, we create a space of love, community, and remembrance. We're going to compile these stories into a drive and share them with the history department to integrate them into the world history curriculum, inshallah. In terms of being vocal about these issues, I see it as my duty as an educator to advocate and raise awareness for the parts of my identity that make me who I am. I think we should all do that, right? Like if we're this, if we're that, whatever we consider ourselves to be, I think it's our duty. Diversity is what makes our community so special. I don't think we should shy away and hide from it. And when it comes to Palestine, I especially try to do all that I can because in so many spaces, we Palestinians are silenced. But I think that through art, I can share my message in a peaceful and impactful way. So more things to come. Another thing on the horizon is learning guitar, so I can really just be one of those people that goes and performs in different places in Dubai. Songs about Palestine, songs I'm passionate about. So yeah, more stuff in the works coming soon.
That's really exciting. I can't wait to see them. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed.
Thank you.
You.